People tell you that grief is a hollow ache, but they never mention the sound of a deadbolt sliding home. 2 hours after the funeral. Meredith locked me out of the house I grew up in. She called it decluttering. I called it an eviction. For 5 years. I stayed quiet, scraping together a life from nothing. But today, I am back in BRIAR GLEN, and the silence is finally over. The drive back to BRIAR GLEN, Michigan, felt less like a homecoming and more like a slow descent into deep water. The windshield wipers of my sedan slapped back and forth against a gray, relentless drizzle, keeping time with the dull throb behind my eyes. I was 32 years old, and I was technically an orphan now. The word felt heavy and jagged in my mouth, something that did not belong to me. Yet there it was. Sitting in the passenger seat beside my purse, I had spent the last 10 years trying to be the steady one, the one who lived 2 states away in Illinois, but always answered the phone on the first ring. The one who sent money when the roof leaked and Mom worried about the heating bill. The one who smoothed over the sharp edges of our family history so nobody got cut. I thought that role would protect me today. I thought being the responsible, reliable Haley Foster would give me some kind of armor against the grief of losing both parents in a span of 3 weeks. Dad to a sudden stroke. Mom to a broken heart that manifested as cardiac arrest. I was wrong. When I pulled into the parking lot of the Greenleaf Funeral Home, the first thing I saw was Meredith's car. It was a pristine silver SUV, parked diagonally across 2 spaces near the entrance, asserting its presence. Meredith was 5 years older than me, and for as long as I could remember, she had moved through the world with the assumption that it would rearrange itself to accommodate her. I checked my face in the rearview mirror. My eyes were red-rimmed, my skin pale and drawn. I took a deep breath, fixing my collar, and told myself to just get through the day, just get through the service, just hold it together. Inside, the air smelled of lilies and industrial carpet cleaner. I found Meredith standing by the guest book, directing the funeral director like he was a subordinate she was about to fire. She looked immaculate. Her black dress was tailored perfectly, her blonde hair swept up in a chignon that didn't have a single strand out of place. She looked like she was attending a board meeting for a company she intended to dismantle. "Haley," she said, not looking up from the list in her hand. "You are late." I looked at my watch. It was 45 minutes before the service started. "I hit traffic near the state line," I said, my voice sounding thin to my own ears. "I am here now. Is there anything I can do?" Meredith finally looked at me. Her gaze was cool, appraising, and entirely devoid of the devastation I felt clawing at my chest. "No," she said. "I have handled everything. You know how you get when you are overwhelmed. It is better if you just sit. I put you in the second row." "The second row?" I blinked, trying to process the slight. "Meredith," I said, "I am their daughter. I should be in the front row with you." She sighed, a short, sharp sound through her nose. "There isn't room. Haley, I have the executor seating there, and Aunt Linda needs the legroom. And frankly, I didn't think you would want to be on display. You look fragile." She said the word loud enough for the funeral director to hear. He glanced at me with pity. I felt a flush of heat rise up my neck. "I am fine," I said, keeping my voice low. "I want to sit with my family." "We will see," she said, turning her back to me to greet a distant cousin who had just walked in. Throughout the visitation, I watched my sister operate. It was a performance. She cried at the exact right moments, dabbing her eyes with a lace handkerchief I had never seen her use before. She held hands with neighbors she had ignored for 20 years. She whispered to our parents' friends, glancing back at me with a look of concern. Shaking her head slightly, I could practically hear the script she was writing for them. "Haley is taking it so hard. She is not herself. I am so worried about her stability." When I walked up to the casket to say goodbye, I froze. The photo displayed on the easel next to the sprays of white roses was a picture from 15 years ago. It was a family portrait taken at Meredith's college graduation. Meredith looked radiant in her cap and gown, standing between Mom and Dad. I was there too, 17 years old, awkward, with braces and a bad haircut, standing off to the side, half-shadowed. It was a picture where she was the sun and the rest of us were just orbiting planets. "Why this one?" I asked, staring at Dad's smiling face. Meredith appeared at my elbow. "It captures them at a happy time," she said. "Before they got old and sick. Before things got complicated." She put a hand on my shoulder, her grip firm. "Pull yourself together. Haley, people are watching." The service passed in a blur of scripture and hymns I didn't hear. When we stood at the graveside, the wind cutting through the bare trees, I tried to focus on the reality of the 2 caskets being lowered into the Michigan clay. This was it, the final door closing. But I couldn't feel the purity of the loss, because Meredith was gripping my arm, physically steering me away from the edge, acting as if I were about to throw myself in. Back at the house, I expected to feel the warmth of memory. Our childhood home, a 2-story colonial with peeling white paint and a porch that always needed sweeping, had been the one constant in my life. But as I walked up the driveway, something felt wrong. The front door, usually scratched from years of keys missing the mark, looked different. The brass of the handle was shiny, unweathered. "Did you change the locks?" I asked as Meredith unlocked the door with a single, smooth motion. "The old ones were sticking," she said, pushing the door open. "Safety first." Inside, the house felt cold. Not just temperature cold, but sterile. The clutter of mail that always sat on the hall table was gone. The throw rugs were straightened to geometric precision. The smell of Dad's pipe tobacco and Mom's vanilla candles had been replaced by the sharp scent of lemon disinfectant. It didn't feel like a home where people had lived and died. It felt like a house that was holding its breath. Guests began to arrive for the reception. Meredith had insisted on hosting it here, claiming it was tradition. But she moved through the rooms like a real estate agent showing a property. She pointed out the crown molding to a neighbor. She mentioned the square footage to the pastor. I retreated to the kitchen, trying to find something familiar. I opened the fridge to find a pitcher of water, needing something to wash down the lump in my throat. "Haley." Meredith walked into the kitchen and closed the door behind her, shutting out the hum of conversation from the living room. She was holding a manila folder. "We need to handle some business while everyone is here," she said. "Now?" I asked. "Meredith, we just buried them 2 hours ago." She placed the folder on the kitchen island. "Grief doesn't stop the legal system. Haley, you know that. Mom and Dad left things clear. I am handling the estate. It makes the most sense. I am here in town. You are hours away in Illinois. It is just logistics." She tapped the folder. "I need you to sign this. It is just a simple acknowledgement of my authority to act as administrator. It lets me pay the funeral home and keep the lights on. Standard procedure." I looked at the paper. It was a single page, dense with legal text. There was no letterhead. "Did a lawyer draft this?" I asked. "I typed it up based on the forms the clerk gave me," she said, her voice tight. "To save the estate money, lawyers are vultures. Haley, you know that. Just sign it so we can move forward." I read the first paragraph. "I, Haley Foster, hereby waive all rights to notice and contest regarding the administration of the estate and grant full, unsupervised authority to Meredith Foster." The wording made my stomach turn. Unsupervised authority, waive all rights. I don't feel comfortable signing this right now, I said, pushing the paper back toward her. I want to read it over when I am not, when we aren't doing this. Meredith's face hardened. The mask of the grieving, dutiful daughter slipped, revealing the steel beneath. "You are being difficult," she said, "just like always. I am trying to save us thousands of dollars in legal fees, and you are acting paranoid. Do you think I am trying to steal Mom and Dad's rusted-out car? The house has a mortgage. Haley, there is no treasure here. If there is no treasure, then there is no rush," I said, surprising myself with the steadiness of my voice. "I will look at it tomorrow." Meredith stared at me for a long moment, her eyes narrowing. Then she snatched the folder off the island. "Fine," she spat. "Do it the hard way. But don't come crying to me when the utilities get shut off because I couldn't access the accounts." She spun on her heel and marched back out to the guests, her smile reattaching itself instantly as she greeted Mrs. Gable from next door. The reception wound down around 7 o'clock. The house emptied, leaving a silence that rang in my ears. I was exhausted, my bones feeling like they were made of lead. All I wanted was to go upstairs, crawl into my old twin bed, and sleep for a week. I walked up the stairs, the wood creaking in familiar places. I turned left at the landing, reaching for the door to my childhood bedroom. I opened it, and the breath left my lungs. The room was empty, not just tidy, empty. The walls were bare, the pale blue paint showing squares of brighter color where my posters had hung since high school. The bookshelf was gone, my desk was gone. The closet door stood open, revealing a vacuumed emptiness. Where are my things? I hadn't realized I'd spoken aloud until Meredith appeared in the hallway behind me. She was holding a trash bag. "I did some decluttering last week," she said casually. "Decluttering?" I turned to face her, my voice rising. "Meredith, this isn't decluttering. This is my life. Where are my yearbooks? Where are the letters Mom wrote me when I was at camp? Where is the jewelry box Dad gave me for my 16th birthday?" She shrugged, leaning against the doorframe. It was all junk. Haley, paper-attracting silverfish, old clothes that smelled like mothballs. I donated most of it. The papers went to recycling. Recycling? I felt a wave of dizziness. "You threw away Mom's letters?" "They were dusty." She said, "Look, I am turning this into a guest room. It needed to be cleared out. You haven't lived here in 10 years. You can't expect us to keep a shrine to your teenage years forever." I pushed past her, running down the hall to the attic pull-down. "It is gone." "Haley," she called after me. "The truck came Tuesday." I stopped, my hand on the cord. I felt hollowed out. It wasn't just the objects. It was the proof that I had lived here, the proof that I was loved here. She had erased me. I slept, or tried to sleep, on the sofa in the living room that night. Meredith claimed the guest room bed wasn't made up, and she was too tired to find linens. I lay in the dark, listening to the house settle, feeling like an intruder in the only place I had ever felt safe. The next morning, the sun broke through the gray clouds. Harsh and bright, I woke up with a stiff neck and a headache that pulsed behind my temples. I needed coffee. Real coffee, not the instant sludge Meredith had in the pantry. I grabbed my purse and keys. Stepping out into the crisp morning air, I drove to the gas station on the corner, bought a large black coffee, and sat in my car for 20 minutes, just breathing. I tried to formulate a plan. I needed to find a lawyer. I needed to understand what was happening. When I drove back to the house, I felt a little steadier. I parked in the driveway and walked up the steps, juggling the hot coffee. I slid my key into the new lock. It went in, but it wouldn't turn. I frowned. Jiggling it, I pulled it out and tried again. Nothing. It was like the wrong key. Then I heard the distinct, heavy clack of a deadbolt sliding into place from the inside. "Meredith?" I called out, knocking on the wood. "Meredith, the key isn't working." There was a pause, and then her voice came through the door, muffled but clear. "It is not supposed to work." "Haley." "What?" I knocked harder. "Open the door. My suitcase is in there. You can collect your approved items later," she said. "I will set a time. I can't have you barging in and out, disrupting the process." "Disrupting the process? I live here." "Well, I am staying here." "Not anymore," she said. "You don't reside here, Haley. You are a guest. And your behavior yesterday, refusing to sign, yelling about the old junk, it shows you are not stable. I need to protect the estate. Open the door," I shouted, my control snapping. I pounded on the wood with my fist. "Meredith!" A truck slowed down on the street. I looked over my shoulder. It was Nolan Reese, the neighbor from across the road. He was a few years older than me, a carpenter who had helped Dad fix the porch steps last summer. He rolled down the window of his battered Ford. "Everything okay?" "Haley?" he asked. His brow furrowed. "No, before I could answer. The front door opened a crack. Meredith stepped out onto the porch, closing the door firmly behind her so I couldn't slip in. She crossed her arms, looking at Nolan with a sad, apologetic smile. She is having a hard morning. Nolan, Meredith called out, her voice pitching perfectly to carry across the lawn. The grief is making her… Well, she is confused. I am not confused, I yelled, turning back to her. You locked me out. Nolan looked between us. Unsure. Do you need a ride somewhere? Haley, I'm heading into town. I looked at Nolan, seeing a lifeline. Yes, I said. Yes, I do. Meredith stepped forward to the edge of the porch steps. Nolan, I wouldn't do that, she said, her voice dropping to a confidential, warning tone that was loud enough for the entire street to hear. She is not stable right now. We are trying to keep things calm. She shouldn't be encouraged to make scenes. Nolan hesitated. He looked at me, seeing my wild hair, my red face, the way I was shaking. Then he looked at Meredith, calm, composed, the responsible older sister. I'm just going to the hardware store, he said awkwardly. He rolled up his window and drove away. I stood there, the humiliation burning my skin like a sunburn. Meredith looked at me, her expression flat. Come back at 4 o'clock. She said, bring a witness. I won't have you accusing me of stealing anything else. She went back inside and locked the door. I walked to my car, my legs trembling so hard I could barely stand. I got inside and locked the doors, feeling exposed, like the whole town was watching the crazy sister fall apart. I looked down at the passenger seat. There was a blue folder there, one I had grabbed from the kitchen counter yesterday in my confusion, thinking it was mine. It had the logo of a law firm on it, Carden Weller, attorneys at law. I grabbed my phone and dialed the number on the folder. Carden and Weller. A woman's voice answered. Hi, I said, my voice shaking. My name is Haley Foster. My parents, Robert and Ellen Foster, just passed away. I found this folder and I need to speak to someone about the estate. I've been locked out of the house. There was a silence on the line, the sound of typing. Ms. Foster, the receptionist said, her tone cooling significantly. We represent the estate administrator. Meredith Foster. Yes, she is my sister. I said, but she just locked me out. I need to know my rights. I am sorry. The receptionist said, since we represent the administrator, it would be a conflict of interest to speak with you without her express written consent. We cannot advise you. But I am an heir. I pleaded. You need to contact your sister. She said, have a good day. The line clicked dead. I sat there for a long time, staring at the dashboard. I had no clothes except what I was wearing. My toothbrush, my charger, my laptop. Everything was in that house. I had maybe $200 in cash in my wallet and my debit card. I put the car in gear and drove to the edge of town, to the Blue Spruce Motel. It was a single-story strip of rooms with peeling paint and a neon sign that buzzed audibly. I paid for 3 nights with my card. The clerk barely looking up from his phone. Room 12 smelled of stale cigarette smoke and industrial lemon cleaner, the same smell as my parents' house. I sat on the edge of the sagging mattress, staring at the popcorn ceiling. I was 32. I had a job in logistics. I paid my taxes. I was a functioning adult, and in 24 hours, I had been reduced to a child, scolded, locked out, and homeless in my own hometown. I thought about Mom. I thought about how she used to brush my hair when I was little, humming songs I couldn't remember anymore. I thought about Dad teaching me to drive in the high school parking lot, his patience endless. They were gone, and the family they had built, the safety they had created, had evaporated with them. I wasn't just grieving them. I was grieving the idea that I had a sister. I was grieving the lie that we were a family. My phone pinged. I picked it up, the screen glowing bright in the dim room. It was a notification from Facebook. Meredith had tagged me in a post. I opened it. It was a tribute. Rest in peace, Mom and Dad. You are together forever now. I will watch over everything you built. Below the text was a collage of photos. There was the picture from the funeral, the one of Meredith and our parents at her graduation. There was a picture of Mom holding Meredith's hand in the hospital. There was a picture of Dad walking Meredith down the aisle at her first wedding. I scrolled through all 10 photos. I wasn't in a single one, in one of the group shots from a Christmas party. The edge of the frame was oddly tight. I zoomed in. I saw the sleeve of my red sweater on the far left. She had cropped me out. I stared at the screen until the backlight timed out and the room went dark again. It wasn't that she had forgotten me. It was that she had remembered to remove me. She was telling a story to the world, a story where she was the only daughter, the only mourner, the only one who mattered. I lay back on the questionable bedspread and closed my eyes. But I didn't cry. The tears had stopped. In their place, something cold and hard was beginning to settle in the pit of my stomach. I was alone. And if I was going to survive this, I had to stop acting like a sister and start acting like a stranger, because that is clearly what I was to her. I rolled over and watched the neon light from the sign outside blink on and off, casting a red rhythm across the wall. Blink, darkness, blink, darkness. I waited for the next blink. I was still here, and I wasn't leaving. At 3:55 in the afternoon, I pulled into the driveway of my childhood home for what I suspected might be the last time. The clouds had cleared, leaving a sharp, bright blue sky that felt mocking in its cheerfulness. I had spent the last 3 hours in the motel room, washing my face with cold water and repeating a single mantra to the mirror. Do not react. Do not give her anything. Meredith was waiting on the porch. She wasn't alone. Standing next to her was Tessa Aldridge, a woman Meredith had known since high school. Tessa was the kind of person who thrived on other people's drama, a supportive friend who was really just a spectator with a front row seat. She was holding her phone up. The camera lens pointed directly at my car as I parked. I stepped out, smoothing my wrinkled blazer. I walked up the driveway, my shoes crunching on the gravel. You are early, Meredith said. 5 minutes, I replied, my voice level. I am just documenting this for everyone's protection, Tessa said, her voice sugary. Given the tension yesterday, I looked directly into the lens of the phone. Hello, Tessa. Nice to see you too. Tessa blinked, unsure how to handle a lack of hysterics. She kept filming. Let's make this quick, Meredith said, unlocking the door. You have 30 minutes. Anything not in your suitcases or clearly marked as yours stays. The estate inventory is still in progress. I walked inside. The air was still cold. I went straight to the guest room, my old room. My suitcase was sitting in the middle of the empty floor, looking small and pathetic. I unzipped it to check the contents. My clothes were there. My laptop. I walked to the closet. Empty. I walked to the dresser. Empty. Where is the jewelry box? I asked, turning to face them. Meredith was leaning against the doorframe. Tessa was hovering behind her. The phone steady. What jewelry box? Meredith asked. The mahogany one. It was on the dresser. It had Mom's pearl earrings, her gold locket, and the silver bracelet she wore every day, and the necklace Dad gave me. Oh, that, Meredith said, waving a hand dismissively. That has been distributed already. Distributed? To whom? I am the only other heir. Meredith. It is part of the estate. Haley, I have to have everything appraised for tax purposes. It is in a safe deposit box. You will get your share of the value once the debts are paid. I want to see the inventory. I said, if you moved it, you must have logged it. The paperwork is with the lawyers, she said. You can request a copy in due time. Now, are you done? You have 10 minutes left. I felt the anger flare, hot and sharp, but I saw the red recording light on Tessa's phone. If I yelled, if I cried, if I accused her of stealing, that video would be circulating among the relatives by dinner. Haley is unstable. Haley is greedy. I took a deep breath. I closed my suitcase. I zipped it shut. I will wait for the inventory. I said. I picked up the suitcase. It was heavy, but I didn't let my arms sag. I walked past them, careful not to bump Meredith, careful not to give Tessa a reason to gasp. On the porch, I stopped. Goodbye. Meredith, I said. She didn't answer. She just watched me walk to my car. her arms crossed, the victor surveying the defeated. I put the suitcase in the trunk. I got in the driver's seat. I drove away without looking back. But as I drove, my mind wasn't quiet. It was racing. Distributed already. That was a lie. You don't distribute assets 3 days after a funeral. You secure them. And if she had put them in a safe deposit box, why couldn't she just say that? Why the evasion? She wasn't following a process. She was hiding things. I didn't leave town immediately. I had one more stop. The law offices of Carden Weller were located in a brick building on Main Street. Sandwiched between a bakery and an insurance agency, I walked in without an appointment. The receptionist, the same one who had hung up on me, looked up. Startled. "I am here to see someone about the Foster estate." I said, "I am not asking for legal advice. I am an heir, and I want to introduce myself." She hesitated, then buzzed a back office. A moment later, a man in his 40s walked out. He wore a gray suit that looked a little tired, and he had the cautious eyes of a man who spent his life mitigating other people's disasters. "Jonah Carden?" I asked. He nodded. "Ms. Foster? Haley?" "Yes." He sighed, glancing at the receptionist. "Come on back. 5 minutes." His office was cluttered with files. He didn't offer me a seat. "I cannot advise you." "Haley," he started, reciting the line. "I represent the administrator." "I know." I said, "I just have a question about the process. Meredith keeps mentioning her authority. When exactly did she get this authority?" Jonah shifted his weight. "Well, the petition was filed. Efficiently. Your sister is very organized. But the power of attorney." I said, "She mentioned she had power of attorney before they died. To handle the bills." "Yes," he said. "The POA was active. It was signed on the 12th of October. I frowned. "October 12th? Jonah blinked, then cleared his throat. "I mean, around that time, I would have to check the file. The point is, it was valid. October 12th was 2 days after Dad's stroke. He was in the ICU. He couldn't speak. He certainly couldn't sign a legal document. And Mom?" I asked. "Similar time frame," he said, looking at his watch. "Look, Haley, the estate is being handled. Meredith is the administrator. If you have concerns, you need to retain your own counsel. I really can't say more." He ushered me out, but as I walked back to my car, the date stuck in my head. October 12th. I drove to the county records office. It was a drab government building with fluorescent lights that hummed too loudly. I paid $15 for a certified copy of both death certificates. I sat on a bench in the hallway and looked at them. Robert Foster. Date of death: November 2nd. Ellen Foster. Date of death: November 24th. I looked at the filing date on the bottom. Meredith had filed for the letters of administration on November 25th. The day after Mom died. Who files probate paperwork the morning after their mother dies? Most people are paralyzed with grief. Meredith had been at the courthouse when the doors opened. The timeline was too tight. You need original death certificates to file. The county doesn't issue them that fast, unless she had them expedited, unless she was pushing. I drove back to Illinois that night. The drive was 4 hours of darkness and silence. I didn't play music. I just replayed Jonah Carden's hesitation. The 12th of October, back in Eastbrook. My apartment felt foreign. It was quiet, clean, and completely disconnected from the chaos I had just left. I worked as a logistics coordinator for a mid-sized shipping firm, Orrinwell Logistics. My job was about order, efficiency, and tracking things that went missing. I tried to go back to work on Monday. I sat at my dual monitors, staring at spreadsheets of shipping containers, but the numbers swam before my eyes. My coworkers offered awkward condolences. "So sorry for your loss. Let us know if you need anything." But they didn't know the half of it. They thought I was grieving parents. They didn't know I was being erased. I couldn't sleep. The insomnia was a physical weight. I would lie in bed at 3 a.m., my heart racing, imagining Meredith in the house. Was she sleeping in Mom's bed? Was she throwing away Dad's books? I started a notebook. It was a black composition book, On the first page, I wrote, "The timeline." I started logging everything. October 10th, Dad's stroke. October 12th, alleged POA signing. November 2nd, Dad dies. November 24th, Mom dies. November 25th, Meredith files for administration. November 28th, the funeral/the lockout. I printed out screenshots of Meredith's Facebook posts, the tributes, the cropped photos. I taped them into the notebook. It felt obsessive, but it was the only thing that made me feel like I wasn't crazy. My gut was telling me that this wasn't just a bossy sister. This was a heist. 2 weeks later, I got a notification from a credit monitoring service I had signed up for years ago for my parents. I had set it up after Dad lost his wallet once, just to be safe. I had forgotten about it until the email landed in my inbox. New inquiry, BRIAR GLEN Community Bank. Type, home equity, line of credit. Applicant, Meredith Foster. I logged in. The inquiry was dated 3 days after the funeral. She had taken a loan against the house. I called the bank, pretending to be Mom. I knew her social security number by heart. The automated system told me the balance, $150,000. She had pulled $150,000 out of the house in less than a month. Why? The house didn't need repairs that cost that much. The roof was 5 years old. The HVAC was new. Was she paying off debts? Or was she just cashing out before I could challenge her? I needed to go back. I took a personal day on Friday. I drove back to BRIAR GLEN, but I didn't go to the house. I went to the county clerk's office again. I sat at one of the public terminals and searched for the property records. There it was, a quitclaim deed. Grantors, Robert and Ellen Foster. Grantee, Meredith Foster. Date, October 15th. It wasn't an inheritance. It was a gift. The deed said they had transferred the house to her before they died. I clicked to view the image of the document. The signatures were shaky. Dad's looked like a spider scrawl. Mom's looked weak, but the notary stamp caught my eye. Page Larkin, Notary Public. I didn't know a Page Larkin. Mom and Dad used old Mr. Henderson at the bank for everything. Who was Page Larkin? I printed the deed. I held the warm paper in my hands, staring at the gift language, for love and affection and no monetary consideration. If this deed was valid, the house wasn't part of the estate. It belonged to Meredith. That was why she could change the locks. That was why she could take the loan. I walked out of the courthouse, the sunlight blinding. I needed coffee. I went to the diner on Main Street. Sitting in a back booth, I was stirring sugar into my cup when a shadow fell over the table. I looked up. It was Nolan Reese. He was holding a takeout bag, looking uncomfortable. "Haley," he said. "Hi, Nolan," I said, bracing myself. If Meredith had got to him, he was probably here to tell me to leave town. I saw you at the courthouse," he said. I stiffened. "You did?" "Yeah. My truck was parked out front." He slid into the booth opposite me, uninvited. He looked nervous, twisting a paper napkin in his large, calloused hands. "I didn't want to get involved," he said quietly. "Meredith. She can be intense. And you know, I live right across the street. I don't need trouble. I understand." I said, "You don't have to say anything." "But it didn't sit right," he said. "What happened that morning? The way she talked about you. You seemed normal, upset, sure, but not crazy. I am not crazy. Nolan, I know. That is why I wanted to tell you something." He leaned in, lowering his voice. "About 3 weeks before your dad passed, I was working on my truck in the driveway. It was a Saturday. A courier van pulled up to your folks' house. Not FedEx or UPS, like a private service. A courier? Yeah. This guy gets out with a thick envelope. Meredith met him at the door. She looked, I don't know, wired, stressed. She took the envelope and didn't even go inside. She signed for it on the porch and then stood there reading through it right on the step. She looked like she was checking a list. "Okay," I said. "That could have been anything. Medical records? Maybe." Nolan said. But then, about 20 minutes later, another car pulls up. A sedan. A woman gets out. She has a bag, like a notary bag or something. She goes in. She is in there for maybe 10 minutes, tops. Then she comes out. Meredith hands her an envelope, and she leaves. 10 minutes, I asked, to notarize a deed for 2 elderly people, one of whom was recovering from a stroke? Exactly. Nolan said, it felt rushed, too prepared, like a pit stop. I looked at Nolan. He was giving me a piece of the puzzle I didn't know I was missing. Why are you telling me this? I asked. He shrugged, looking down at the table. Your dad was a good guy. Haley. He loaned me his generator when the power went out last winter. He always talked about you. My Haley in Illinois, he'd say. She is the smart one. My throat tightened. He never said anything about giving Meredith the house? I asked. Never. Nolan said, he said he wanted to sell it eventually. Use the money to travel with your mom. That was the plan. I reached across the table and touched his hand briefly. Thank you. Nolan, be careful, he said, standing up. She is on a warpath. I have seen her yelling at the contractors she hired. Contractors? Yeah, she is gutting the kitchen. Ripped out your mom's cabinets yesterday. The news hit me like a physical blow. Mom loved those cabinets. I drove back to Illinois with the deed on the passenger seat. I needed a lawyer, a real one, not someone in BRIAR GLEN who went to high school with Meredith. I found Maris Holt. She was based in Chicago. A shark in a silk blouse who specialized in contested estates. Her hourly rate made me sweat, but I paid the retainer from my savings. I met her in her glass-walled office overlooking the skyline. I laid it all out. The lockout, the timeline, the loan, the deed, Nolan's story. Maris listened, taking notes on a yellow pad. When I finished, she took off her glasses and looked at me. I am going to be honest with you. Haley, she said. Her voice was not warm, but it was respectful. Family litigation is the bloodiest sport there is. It will drain your bank account. It will rot your soul. And at the end of the day, the law usually favors the person holding the keys. She tapped the copy of the deed. This deed is the problem. On its face, it is valid, notarized, recorded. To overturn it, we have to prove fraud. And proving fraud against a dead person's signature is incredibly difficult. We need expert witnesses, handwriting analysis, depositions. It will cost you tens of thousands of dollars, and we might lose. I stared at the city below. So I should just let her have it? Maris leaned back. I am saying you need to pick your battle. Is this about the house, or is this about the principle? It is about the truth. I said, my parents didn't do this. I know they didn't. Then we investigate. She said, the timeline is suspicious. The notary is a lead. But Haley, this won't be quick. It could take years. I thought about my empty apartment. I thought about the way Meredith had looked at me on the porch. You don't reside here. I can't fight her right now. I said quietly, I don't have the money. I don't have the energy. Maris nodded. That is a valid choice. The statute of limitations for fraud is 5 years in Michigan. You have time. 5 years. I looked at Maris. If I wait, does the evidence disappear? Some of it, she said. But paper trails are hard to erase completely. And people make mistakes when they get comfortable. I made a decision then. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. I wasn't going to sue. Not yet. I was going to let Meredith think she had won. I was going to let her spend the money. I was going to let her get comfortable. I stood up. I want to retain you to keep the file open. I said, but I'm not filing anything yet. I am going to wait. Maris smiled. A small, sharp thing. Patience is a weapon. Haley, most people don't know how to use it. I drove home. I unpacked my suitcase. I put the notebook with the timeline in the bottom drawer of my desk. I stopped calling Meredith. I stopped asking for the inventory. I stopped begging for my mother's necklace. I focused on my job. I worked late. I took on extra projects. I got promoted. I moved to a slightly nicer apartment. I saved every penny I could. I built a life that had nothing to do with BRIAR GLEN. I dated a nice guy for a while, but it ended because I couldn't open up. I was guarding a secret part of myself. a silo of anger that I was fermenting into fuel. Every few months, I would check the online records. Meredith bought a new car. Meredith was sued by a contractor for non-payment. Meredith refinanced the loan. She was messy. She was burning through the equity, and I was watching. I wasn't the fragile little sister anymore. I was a ledger. I was a camera recording in the dark. I would rebuild my dignity first. I would become someone she couldn't dismiss as unstable. So when I finally went back, I wouldn't be begging for scraps. I would be coming for the whole table. Time does not heal all wounds, but it does build a layer of scar tissue thick enough to let you function. For the first year after the funeral, I was a ghost haunting my own life. I went to work. I came home. I stared at the ceiling. But eventually, the rhythm of survival took over. I stopped waking up at 3 a.m. wondering if Meredith was sleeping in my childhood bed. I stopped checking her Facebook page every hour. I forced myself to look forward, not backward. 5 years passed. In that time, I rebuilt myself. Brick by boring brick, at Ornwell Logistics. I moved from a cubicle in the corner to a glass-walled office as a senior operations manager. I became the person who solved problems. When a shipment of automotive parts got stuck in a blizzard in Nebraska, I was the one who found the reroute. When a client screamed about a delayed contract, I was the one who talked them down. I cultivated a reputation for being unflappable. My colleagues didn't know that my composure wasn't a natural gift. It was a defense mechanism forged in the fire of my sister's betrayal. I saved money aggressively. I maxed out my 401k. I built an emergency fund that could sustain me for a year. I bought a sensible condo in a quiet neighborhood in Eastbrook. It was modern, clean, and completely devoid of history. No creaky floorboards, no attic full of memories, just gray walls and stainless steel. It was safe, but safety is a fragile thing. It was a Tuesday in late October when the past came knocking. I was at my desk, reviewing a quarterly budget. When my cell phone buzzed, the number was unfamiliar, but the area code was 269, BRIAR GLEN. I stared at the screen. My heart did a traitorous double beat. I hadn't spoken to anyone from home in 3 years, not since I stopped sending Christmas cards to the few cousins who hadn't taken Meredith's side. I answered it. "This is Haley." There was a pause, a hesitation on the other end. "Hi, Haley, this is Dawn. Dawn Pell." The name took a moment to register. Then I remembered. Dawn was the home health aide we had hired for Dad in those final, chaotic weeks after his stroke. She was a quiet, sturdy woman who smelled of peppermint and antiseptic. She had been the one to change his sheets when he couldn't move. She had been the one to hold the straw to his lips. "Dawn," I said, my voice softening. "I remember you. Is everything okay? I am sorry to bother you at work," she said. "I found your number in an old contact book I kept. I have been cleaning out my garage, okay? I have a box." "Haley, a box? When your parents passed, after the funeral, your sister, Meredith, she went on a cleaning spree. You remember?" My hand tightened around my pen. I remembered. She was throwing things out in black bags. Dawn continued, "Just tossing them. She gave me a pile of stuff to take to the dump. Old magazines, newspapers, mail. She said it was all trash." I waited, my breath held in my chest. "I took it," Dawn said, "but when I got home, I don't know. It felt wrong to just throw it in the dumpster. Your dad was a sweet man. He always asked about my kids. So I just put the box on a shelf in my garage and forgot about it. Until this weekend, I was looking for some winter gear and I opened it. And there is mail in there. Haley, unopened mail. Some of it looks official. I didn't want to read it, but I saw your name on a few old birthday cards that never got sent. And there are other things. I thought maybe you would want to see it before I actually toss it." I closed my eyes. 5 years of peace. 5 years of silence. I could tell her to burn it. I could tell her I didn't want to know, but the ledger in my head, the one I had never really closed, opened itself to a fresh page. "I want to see it." I said, "Can you mail it to me?" "I don't trust the mail with this," Dawn said. the box is falling apart. And, honestly, Haley, I think you should see this in person. I drove to BRIAR GLEN that Saturday. I rented a car, a generic blue sedan, because I didn't want my own license plate to be spotted. The paranoia was still there, sitting under my skin like a low-grade fever. I met Dawn at a diner 2 towns over, a neutral ground. She looked older, her hair grayer, but her eyes were kind. She slid a cardboard box across the booth table. It smelled of mildew and dust. I offered to pay her for her time, but she refused. "Just take it," she said. "Meredith." She was in such a hurry that week. It spooked me. You don't throw away a person's life that fast unless you are running from something. I took the box back to my motel room. I didn't go to the Blue Spruce this time. I stayed at a chain hotel on the highway, anonymous and sterile. I dumped the contents onto the bedspread. It was mostly junk. Expired coupons, flyers for gutter cleaning, catalogs for gardening tools. There were 2 birthday cards addressed to me, signed by Mom in shaky handwriting, but never stamped. Seeing them made my throat tight. Then I saw it, a long white envelope. It had been ripped in half, as if someone had started to tear it up and then got distracted. The return address was Ashford Trust and Ledger. I frowned. I knew my parents' finances. They used the local community bank. They didn't have a trust. They didn't have enough assets to require a wealth management firm. I pieced the 2 halves together. Stamped in red ink on the front was, "Second notice, action required." The postmark was dated August 10th of that year, 3 months before Dad died, 2 months before his stroke. I tapped it open. The letter inside was form text, but the details stopped my heart. "Dear Mr. Foster, regarding the amendment to the Foster Family Living Trust dated July 2008, we require your signature on the attached schedule of assets to finalize the transfer. Please refer to the instruction regarding the side letter. Trust? July 2008? That was the year Dad retired. I pulled out my phone and took a picture of the document. Then I called Maris Holt. I hadn't spoken to Maris in 4 years. I had kept her on a minimal retainer, sending a check every January just to keep the file active. But we hadn't had a real conversation since I decided to walk away. She answered on the second ring. "Haley Foster." She said, "I was wondering when you would call. I found something." I said, I emailed her the photo. There was silence on the line while she reviewed it. Ashford Trust and Ledger. Maris said finally, "That is a boutique firm, very private. My parents didn't have a trust." I said, "Meredith probated the estate as if they died intestate, without a will, except for that deed she forged. If there was a trust, the house should have been in it. If the house was in the trust," Maris said, her voice sharpening, "then the deed transfer Meredith executed would be invalid. You can't gift a property you don't personally own anymore." I felt a surge of adrenaline. "But look at the date." I said, "August. Dad got this letter months before he died. It says second notice. He might have set it up and never funded it." Maris said, "That happens. People sign the trust documents but forget to change the titles on their bank accounts and deeds. It is called a dry trust, but it mentions a side letter." I said, "What is that?" "A side letter of wishes," Maris explained. "It is a document that accompanies a trust. It isn't always legally binding in the strictest sense, but it guides the trustee. It is where parents put the things they don't want in the public record. Specific instructions, explanations for why they are doing what they are doing. If Meredith found this," I started. "If she found it," Maris finished, "she buried it. Haley, I need to send a formal inquiry to Ashford Trust and Ledger. I can do it as the attorney for a potential beneficiary." "Do it," I said. I hung up and sat on the edge of the bed. The room felt too small. I needed air. I put on my coat and drove into BRIAR GLEN. It was dusk. The streetlights were flickering on, casting long orange shadows on the pavement. I drove past the high school, past the park where I used to play softball. It all looked exactly the same and completely different. It was a town that had moved on without me. I turned onto Oak Street. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. There it was, number 412. The house. I slowed down. Pulling to the curb 3 houses down, hidden by the shadows of a large maple tree. The house had changed. The peeling white paint was gone, replaced by a trendy dark charcoal siding. The porch railing had been replaced with modern horizontal slats. The overgrown azaleas Mom loved were ripped out, replaced by severe geometric landscaping. It looked like a house from a magazine. It looked cold, but something was off. I squinted. There was a new addition on the back, peeking out from the side yard. A sunroom? Maybe? Or an expansion of the kitchen? I pulled out my phone and pulled up the GLEN municipal website. I had become an expert at navigating public records in my job. I searched for building permits for 412 Oak Street. No results found. I refreshed the page. I searched by Meredith's name. No results found. She had done a major renovation. Siding, porch, addition, without a single permit. That wasn't just sloppy. In a town like BRIAR, where the building inspector was notoriously strict, that was suicide. Unless she was hiding the work, unless she was paying cash to contractors who didn't ask questions, why hide the improvements? Improvements increase value. Unless she didn't want anyone looking too closely at the property. A tap on my window made me jump. I looked up to see a face pressed against the glass. Nolan. He looked older. His beard had more gray in it, and there were deeper lines around his eyes. He was wearing a heavy canvas jacket. I rolled down the window. "You are lurking." "Haley," he said softly. "I didn't think anyone would see me. I saw you." He said, "I always watch the street. Old habit." He leaned his arms on the doorframe, looking at the house. "It looks different, doesn't it?" he asked. "It looks like a stranger lives there." I said, "She put the siding on last year." Nolan said, "And the addition. That was 6 months ago. The crews worked at night mostly, weekends, fast and loud. She didn't pull permits." I said, "I know." Nolan nodded. "The inspector came by once. Meredith met him in the driveway. They talked for 2 minutes. She handed him an envelope, and he left. I haven't seen him since." "Bribes?" I whispered. "Or blackmail?" Nolan shrugged. "She has been different. Haley, manic. She drives a new Mercedes. She wears expensive clothes. But I see the collection notices taped to her front door sometimes before she rips them down. She is running fast to stay in the same place." He looked at me, his eyes serious. "Why are you back?" "I think I found something." "Good," he said, "because she is erasing everything. Haley, if you are going to do something, do it before she sells it. I heard her on the phone in the yard last week. She was talking about liquidating. Liquidating. The word chilled me. I need to go to the storage unit. I said, "The one on Route 9. Mom and Dad kept their seasonal stuff there." Nolan nodded. "It is still there. But the code probably changed. I will figure it out." I said, "I drove to the U-Store IT facility on the edge of town. It was a row of orange metal doors behind a chain-link fence. The office was closed, but the manager's light was on. I walked in. It wasn't Mr. Henderson anymore. It was a young guy with a nose ring and a bored expression. "Can I help you?" he asked, not looking up from his phone. "Hi," I said, putting on my best corporate voice. "I am Haley Foster. My parents, Robert and Ellen Foster, rented Unit 4B for years. I am trying to sort out some estate details." He typed into the computer. "Unit 4B is under Meredith Foster," he said. "Since when?" I asked. Transfer date was November 30th, 5 years ago, 2 days after the funeral. "Okay," I said. "Can you tell me if the billing address is the same? I can't give out personal info." He recited, "I understand." I said, "But my mother, she was very particular about her records. She kept everything. Did the account have any notes on it?" He sighed, clicked a few keys. "Look, lady, the only note here is from the transfer. Contents of Unit 4B, assumed by Meredith Foster per verbal agreement." "Verbal agreement?" I asked. "That is what it says." I looked at the counter. There was a stack of papers in a wire basket labeled scanning/shredding. "What is that?" I asked, pointing. Old files, he said. We are digitizing. Anything older than 7 years gets scanned and shredded. Can I just look for my dad's signature? I asked, just for sentimental reasons. I miss his handwriting. It was a weird request, but the guy shrugged. He was bored. Knock yourself out. Just don't mess up the order. I started flipping through the stack. It was mostly rental agreements. Then I saw a file folder with Foster written on the tab in Mom's neat script. I opened it. It was the original rental agreement from 20 years ago. But tucked behind it was a photocopy of a handwritten note. It wasn't on a form. It was on a piece of notebook paper. To the management. Please allow both my daughters, Meredith Foster and Haley Foster, access to the unit. The binder for the trust is in the cedar chest in the back. I want both daughters protected if anything happens to me. Signed, Robert Foster. Notarized, October 2012. The trust binder. It existed, and it was in the cedar chest. I looked at the manager. Can I make a copy of this? I asked, my voice trembling. Take a picture, he said. I have to shred it anyway. I took the photo. I walked back to my car, my heart hammering against my ribs. Dad had explicitly mentioned the trust. He had explicitly mentioned protecting both of us. This wasn't just about money. This was about his intent. He had a plan, and Meredith had intercepted it. I sat in the dark car, the engine idling. I could drive away. I could go back to my condo in Eastbrook. I could go back to my safe job, my growing 401k, my quiet weekends. I had peace. I had dignity. If I started this fight, I would lose all of that. I would be dragged back into the mud. I would be the greedy sister suing for money. The town would talk. Meredith would lie. It would be ugly. Was a house worth it? No. A house was just wood and siding. But it wasn't about the house. It was about the erasure. It was about the fact that she had looked me in the eye at our parents' funeral and decided I didn't exist. She had stolen their final wishes. She had stolen their voice. If I walked away now, I wasn't just letting her win. I was helping her lie to them. I put the car in gear. I wasn't going back to Eastbrook. Not yet. I needed one more piece of information. Nolan had mentioned debt collectors. I drove to the county courthouse the next morning as soon as it opened. I went to the civil records terminal. I searched Meredith Foster. The screen filled with results. Small claims, lawn service versus Meredith Foster. Small claims, elite catering versus Meredith Foster. And then, the big one, civil suit, Grayson Pike. Capital versus Meredith Foster. Filing date, 3 months ago. Amount in controversy, $85,000. I clicked on the complaint. Grayson Pike Capital was a private lender, a hard money lender, the kind that charges 20% interest and takes collateral when banks say no. The complaint detailed the loan. Meredith had borrowed $85,000 2 years ago, secured by a second position lien on the property. But wait, she already had the home equity line from the community bank for $150,000. The house was worth maybe $300,000 in a good market. With the first mortgage, which I assumed she was paying, or maybe not, the home equity line, and this hard money loan, the house was underwater. She had stripped every dime of equity out of it. Where did the money go? I scrolled down. The Grayson Pike loan had been dispersed to a corporate entity, Foster Concepts, LLC. I searched for the LLC. It was registered to Meredith. Purpose, event planning and consulting. She had tried to start a business. She had leveraged the house to the hilt to fund a lifestyle and a business that had failed. And now, the sharks were circling. She wasn't just erasing me to be mean. She was erasing me because she needed the money. She needed the whole house to keep her house of cards from collapsing. I printed the complaint. I walked out of the courthouse and called Maris. I have the intent. I said into the phone, I found a note from Dad mentioning the trust binder. And I have the motive. She is broke. Maris. She owes a hard money lender $85,000 and she is being sued. She committed fraud because she was drowning. We have enough to start. Maris said, but Haley, once we file, There is no going back. She will fight dirty. She has nothing left to lose. I know, I said. I looked across the street at the park. I saw a father pushing a little girl on a swing. She was laughing, her head thrown back, trusting him completely to catch her. I thought about Dad. I thought about how he trusted Meredith to take care of things. She betrayed him. I said, I'm not doing this for the money. The money is probably gone. I'm doing this because she doesn't get to rewrite his legacy to cover her failure. Okay, Maris said. I will draft the petition. We are going to challenge the deed and demand a full accounting of the trust. Wait, I said. My mind was racing. Connecting the dots. The second notice from Ashford. The missing side letter. The unpermitted renovations. The hard money loan. If we file now, she will destroy whatever evidence is left. I said, she will burn that binder if she hasn't already. What do you want to do? We need to trap her. I said, we need to make her think she is safe, right up until the moment she isn't. We need the side letter. And I think I know where it is. Where? Dad's note said it was in the cedar chest. Meredith told me she donated everything, but she didn't throw away the jewelry. She keeps the things that have value. That cedar chest was an antique. It was Mom's grandmother's. She wouldn't have thrown it out. Maris agreed. She would have sold it or kept it. I'm going to find that chest. I said, and when I do, then we file. I hung up. I wasn't the scared sister in the motel room anymore. I wasn't the passive observer. I got back in my rental car. I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. It was the calm of the sniper, the patience of the hunter. I had spent 5 years building a life of order and logistics. I knew how to track things. I knew how to find what was missing. Meredith had taken the house. She had taken the money. She had taken the past. But she had made one fatal mistake. She had underestimated how long I could hold a grudge, and she had forgotten that while she was playing checkers with local contractors, I had been learning how to play chess. I started the engine. It was time to go to work. The letter Maris Holt sent was not a scream. It was a whisper of steel. It was a standard demand for production of documents, requesting the notary logs, the loan closing statements, the complete chain of title for the deed transfer, and the specifics of the power of attorney Meredith had claimed to hold. To a normal person, it was a legal formality. To someone with secrets, it was a declaration of war. We didn't have to wait long for a response. 3 days later, Maris forwarded me a PDF attached to an email. Read this. Maris wrote in the body of the email, "Do not reply. Do not call her." I opened the attachment. It wasn't from a lawyer. It was written on Meredith's personal stationery. Cream paper with her monogram embossed at the top, a pretension she had adopted in her late 20s. Haley, I am appalled, though not surprised, that you have chosen to harass me through a hired attorney. After everything I have done to manage Mom and Dad's affairs, after I took on the burden of their care while you were playing corporate climber in Illinois, this is how you repay me? There are no missing documents. The deed is a matter of public record. The loans were necessary to preserve the asset. If you continue to stalk me, question my neighbors, or harass my associates, I will have no choice but to file for a restraining order. I will not let you destabilize my mental health or slander our family name. Consider this a formal cease and desist. Meredith. I stared at the screen, my coffee turning cold in my hand. It was classic Meredith. Attack the accuser, claim victimhood, and bury the actual question under a pile of emotional guilt. She hadn't addressed the timeline. She hadn't explained the notary. She had just threatened me with the police. I called Maris. She is scared, Maris said, her voice calm and analytical. She says she is going to get a restraining order. I said, she can't. Maris replied, you haven't threatened her. You are an heir asking for an accounting. That is a legal right, not harassment. But notice what isn't in the letter. Haley. She didn't name an attorney. She wrote this herself. What does that mean? It means Jonah Carden didn't write it, which means either she didn't show it to him, or he refused to sign his name to it. I looked at the letter again. The aggression masked a tremor. She was flailing. I am not stopping. Maris, I said. Good, she said. Because I ran the background check on your notary. Paige Larkin. I grabbed a pen. Paige Larkin was a mobile notary commissioned in BRIAR, GLEN. Maris said, but her commission was suspended by the Secretary of State on November 30th, 5 years ago. November 30th, 2 days after the funeral, 5 days after Meredith filed the deed. Why was it suspended? I asked. The record just says, administrative investigation, Maris said, but I dug a little deeper into the county logs. Paige Larkin hasn't notarized a single document since then. She vanished from the professional registry. If the notary was suspended 2 days after the deed was recorded, I said, my mind racing. That can't be a coincidence. It never is. Maris said, you need to find her. Haley. A suspended notary with a revoked stamp is the thread that unravels the whole sweater. I spent the next 2 nights acting less like a logistics manager and more like a private investigator. I used the skills I had honed tracking lost freight across international borders. I searched social media, property records, and old yearbooks. Paige Larkin was 24 years old when she notarized that deed. She had worked as a receptionist at a title company in a neighboring town. I found her current address on a voter registration list updated 6 months ago. She was living in a small rental complex in fictional Cedar Creek, about 20 miles south of BRIAR, GLEN. But before I drove to Cedar Creek, I needed to talk to Nolan again. I drove back to BRIAR, GLEN on a rainy Thursday night. The town looked slick and black, the streetlights haloed in the mist. I parked down the street from Nolan's house and texted him, "Can we talk? I am outside." He came out onto his porch 5 minutes later, wearing a flannel shirt over a thermal tee. I ran through the rain to the shelter of his overhang. "You shouldn't be here. Haley," he said, keeping his voice low. "Meredith has been watching the street. She put up cameras. I don't care about cameras anymore." I said, "I need to know about the night before the funeral. You said you heard arguing." Nolan rubbed the back of his neck, looking uncomfortable. "It was late," he said, "maybe 11 o'clock. I was letting the dog out. I heard voices in your parents' driveway. Loud. Whispering, but that kind of loud whispering that cuts through the air. Who was it? Meredith, obviously. And a guy. I couldn't see him clearly because he was standing by the garage door. In the shadows. But he was agitated. What did they say? I heard Meredith say, "It is already done. Just keep your mouth shut." And the guy said something about the timeline and the signature doesn't match. The signature doesn't match. I felt a cold prickle at the base of my spine. "Did you hear anything else?" I asked. "Yeah," Nolan said. Meredith grabbed his arm. I saw the motion sensor light flick on for a second. She said, "I paid you to fix it, not to panic." Then they went inside. "Paid you to fix it. Could it have been the notary?" I asked. "No," Nolan said. "It was a man. Tall, heavy-set, definitely not a 24-year-old woman." I thanked him and drove away, my mind spinning. A man, fixing it, the signature. The next morning, I drove to Cedar Creek. Paige Larkin's apartment complex was a row of beige stucco buildings that had seen better days. I found Unit 204. There was a rusted bicycle chained to the railing. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again. I heard movement inside. The peephole darkened. "Who is it?" a female voice called out. She sounded wary. "Paige, my name is Haley Foster. I need to ask you about a document you notarized for my parents, Robert and Ellen Foster." There was a long silence, then the sound of a deadbolt sliding back. The door opened a crack, kept in check by a security chain. A woman with dark, messy hair and tired eyes peered out. She looked older than 29. She looked worn down. "I don't do notary work anymore," she said. "I know." I said, "I know your commission was suspended 5 years ago." Her eyes widened slightly. She started to close the door. "Wait," I said, putting my hand on the frame. "Please, my sister, Meredith, took my parents' house. She used a deed with your stamp on it. I just want to know the truth. I didn't sign it," she blurted out. The words hung in the air between us, heavy and absolute. "What?" I whispered. I didn't sign it, she hissed, her voice trembling. Go away. Paige, I said, keeping my voice calm. If you didn't sign it, then someone committed a felony using your name. I am going to court. If I subpoena you, you will have to testify. But if you talk to me now, if you help me understand, I can tell my lawyer you are a victim in this, not a conspirator. She looked at me, her lower lip trembling. She looked over her shoulder into her dark apartment, then back at me. She undid the chain and opened the door. Come in, she said, but you have to leave in 10 minutes. My boyfriend hates it when I have people over. I stepped inside. The apartment smelled of stale coffee and laundry detergent. We stood in the small living room. Tell me, I said. It was 5 years ago, she said, hugging her arms around herself. I was working at the title company in Oakville. I did mobile signings on the side for extra cash. One day, I went to my car after work, and my bag was broken into. Your notary bag? Yeah, my stamp, my journal. It was all gone. Did you report it? Of course I did. I filed a police report that night. I called the Secretary of State the next morning to report the stamp stolen. That is why they suspended my commission. To protect me, so nobody could use it. I stared at her. If she had reported it stolen, then Meredith, or whoever helped her, had used a stolen stamp. Did you know Meredith Foster? I asked. No. She shook her head. But about a week before the theft, I notarized a car title transfer for a guy. Greasy guy. Tried to flirt with me. He saw my stamp in the bag in my back seat. Who was he? I don't remember his name. But he worked for some investment place. Pike? Peak? Grayson Pike? I asked, my blood running cold. Yeah, she said. That sounds right. I felt the pieces clicking together like magnets. Grayson Pike Capital. The hard money lender Meredith owed $85,000 to. The lender she had paid off with the home equity loan. They didn't just lend her money, they helped her steal the house. Someone from Grayson Pike stole Paige's stamp, or bought it off someone who did, and used it to forge the deed so Meredith could get the title, get the loan, and pay them back. Did you ever see the deed? I asked. No, she said. I just got a letter from the state saying a document had been recorded with my stolen stamp, and they were invalidating it. But the county had already processed it. I was so scared. I thought I would go to jail. I just quit. I moved here. I wanted to disappear. You are not going to jail. Paige, I said, but I need you to sign an affidavit, just stating what you told me, that your stamp was stolen and you did not notarize that deed. She hesitated. If I do, will you keep me out of court? I can't promise that. I said honestly, but if you tell the truth, you are the witness, not the defendant. If you hide, and they find out you knew, that is worse. She nodded slowly. Okay, she said. I will sign it. I walked out of that apartment with a handwritten statement on a piece of lined paper. Signed and dated. I took a picture of it immediately and emailed it to Maris. We had the smoking gun. Maris didn't waste time. 2 days later, she filed a petition in the GLEN probate court. In re, the estate of Robert and Ellen Foster. Petition to set aside deed, remove administrator, and for accounting. The petition was brutal in its clarity. It alleged that the quitclaim deed dated October 15th was a forgery. It alleged that Meredith Foster had obtained the property through fraud. It attached Paige Larkin's affidavit. It attached the timeline of the suspiciously timed death certificate filing. We didn't mention the trust binder yet. We were saving that. We wanted to see how she reacted to the forgery charge first, when the sheriff served Meredith with the papers. The reaction was immediate and public. I was back in Eastbrook, trying to focus on a logistics spreadsheet, when my phone started blowing up. It was my Aunt Linda, then my cousin Mike, then a neighbor I hadn't seen in 10 years. Haley, what are you doing? Haley, how could you sue your own sister? Haley, Meredith is devastated. I logged onto Facebook. Meredith had gone nuclear. She had posted a long, rambling status update. I am heartbroken to share that my estranged sister, Haley, has decided to attack our family's legacy. after abandoning our parents in their final years. She is now trying to take their home away from me through frivolous lawsuits. She is claiming Mom and Dad didn't love me enough to give me the house. It is sick. Please pray for me as I deal with this greed and malice." Below the text was a picture of Meredith crying, holding a framed photo of our parents. The comments were a wall of sympathy. "Stay strong. Meredith, money changes people. So sad. We know who was really there for them. Mare," I read the comments, feeling a physical nausea. She was winning the court of public opinion. She was painting me as the greedy, absent villain. I wanted to reply. I wanted to post the affidavit. I wanted to scream. She stole a notary stamp. She is a criminal. But I remembered Maris's advice. You don't argue with a liar in the street. You argue with them under oath. I put my phone down. I didn't reply to the texts. I didn't comment on the post. I let the silence sit there. Let them talk. The truth was coming. Then, the first crack in Meredith's armor appeared. I received a call from a number I recognized. Jonah Carden. I let it go to voicemail, thinking he was calling to threaten me on Meredith's behalf. I listened to the message 5 minutes later. "Ms. Foster, this is Jonah Carden. I am calling to inform you as a courtesy that as of this morning, I have filed a motion to withdraw as counsel for the estate and for Meredith Foster. I can no longer represent the administrator due to professional ethical considerations that have arisen in light of new information. I suggest you direct all future correspondence to Ms. Foster directly until she retains new counsel." I played the message again. Professional ethical considerations, in lawyer speak. That was code for, my client is lying to me, or she asked me to do something illegal, and I'm getting off this sinking ship before I get disbarred. Jonah Carden knew. He had seen the affidavit in our petition, or maybe he had asked Meredith about the notary and she had slipped up. Either way, the responsible estate attorney had just fled the scene. Meredith was alone, but she didn't fold. She doubled down. 2 days later, Maris called me. "We got the bank records," she said. "The subpoena to BRIAR GLEN Community Bank came back. And? You were right about the money." Maris said, "The day the home equity line was funded, $150,000. Meredith wired $85,000 to Grayson Pike Capital." "The payoff?" "Yes," Maris said. "But here is the interesting part. The wire wasn't labeled loan payoff. It was labeled settlement and services." "Services?" I asked. "What kind of services does a hard money lender provide?" "Illegal ones," Maris said dryly. "Like procuring a notary stamp or backdating a document. Haley, this connects Meredith directly to the fraud. She didn't just benefit from it. She paid for the mechanism of the theft. But there is more," Maris continued. "What?" "There is a second wire, $10,000, sent the same day to a personal account at a different bank." "Whose account?" "I don't know yet," Maris said. "The name is redacted on this statement. We have to subpoena the receiving bank." "But the memo line says, water remediation." "Water remediation?" I frowned. "There was no flood." "Exactly," Maris said. "And that brings me to the insurance claim." I pulled the claim history on the house. I held my breath. "Meredith filed a claim with the homeowner's insurance carrier 1 week after your parents died." Maris said, "Claim type, water damage in the basement. Claim denied because she couldn't prove the source of the leak. But why file a claim if there was no damage?" "Because," Maris said, her voice dropping, "she needed an official record of damage to explain why certain things were destroyed. The papers." I whispered, "If anyone asked where the trust binder was, or the financial records, or the inventory?" "Oh, there was a flood in the basement. So sad. Everything was ruined. It was a manufactured excuse, a cover story planted in the insurance database just in case." She thought of everything. I said, "She thought of almost everything," Maris corrected. "She didn't think you would find the second notice letter. She didn't think you would track down the notary. And she definitely didn't think you would have the patience to wait 5 years to strike." I hung up the phone and looked out the window of my office. The parking lot was full of trucks moving cargo. A symphony of logistics and order. I felt a strange, cold heaviness in my chest. I was winning. The evidence was piling up. The lawyer had quit. The notary had confessed. The money trail was glowing neon bright, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like a funeral. Every piece of evidence I found was another shovel of dirt on the grave of the sister I used to know. I had held on to a tiny, foolish hope that maybe I was wrong. Maybe there was a misunderstanding. Maybe she had just been greedy and careless. Not malicious. But this? Hiring a lender to forge a deed? Paying for services? Creating a fake flood to destroy our father's last wishes? This was a stranger. A stranger wearing my sister's face. I feared what would happen when we finally walked into that courtroom. I feared that winning the house would cost me the last shred of my family history. If I exposed her, I wasn't just taking back the property, I was destroying her life. She could go to prison. I closed my eyes, both daughters protected. Dad had written, he didn't know. He couldn't have known that one daughter would need protection from the other. I opened my eyes. I wasn't stopping. Comfort was a luxury I couldn't afford anymore. Truth was the only thing that would survive this fire. I picked up the phone and dialed Maris back. Subpoena the second bank. I said, I want to know who got the 10 grand for water remediation. I had a feeling I already knew. Meredith had been arguing with a man in the driveway. I paid you to fix it. Nolan said the man was heavy-set. I thought about the timeline. I thought about the deed. Someone had to physically create the forgery. Someone had to handle the paperwork. I had a hunch that the $10,000 didn't go to a contractor. I had a hunch it went to someone who knew how to make documents look real. We were going to find him, and when we did, Meredith wouldn't just lose the house. She would lose the narrative she had so carefully curated for 5 years. The fragile sister was coming home, and she was bringing the sledgehammer. The BRIAR GLEN probate court smelled of lemon oil and old anxiety. It was a smell I remembered from the day I got my driver's license. But today, the stakes were not about parallel parking. They were about the dismantling of my family's history. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Maris Holt. Maris looked like a weapon sheathed in expensive wool. Her posture rigid. Her notes arranged in a precise grid. Across the aisle, at the defense table, sat Meredith. She had hired a new attorney, a man named Silas Vance from Grand Rapids, who wore a suit that cost more than my car. But I wasn't looking at him. I was looking at my sister. Meredith was wearing a navy blue dress with a high collar, modest and maternal. Her hair was pulled back in a soft, low bun. She wore no makeup except for a touch of powder to make her look pale, perhaps a little sleepless. She sat with her hands folded on the table, her head bowed slightly, the very picture of the grieving, burdened daughter who was being persecuted by her greedy, estranged sibling. If I didn't know her, I would have believed her. I felt a tremor start in my hands, hidden beneath the table. It wasn't fear. Exactly. It was a physical reaction to the gaslighting. Seeing her there, looking so composed, so right, made a small, terrified part of my brain wonder if I was actually the crazy one. Maybe I was the villain. Maybe I was imagining the forgery, the lies, the theft. Then Maris reached over and placed her hand over mine. Her skin was cool, her grip firm. Focus on the ledger. Haley, she whispered, not looking at me. Facts do not have feelings. Judge Ambrose walked in. He was a man in his 60s with a face carved from granite and eyes that had seen every variety of human dishonesty. He sat down, adjusted his glasses, and looked at the 2 tables. This is a hearing on the petition to set aside deed and remove administrator, he said, his voice gravelly. I have read the filings. The allegations are serious. Fraud, forgery, breach of fiduciary duty. I want to be clear. This court is not a therapy session. I am not interested in your childhood squabbles. I am interested in the law. Proceed. Maris stood up. Your Honor, she said, her voice clear and projecting to the back of the room. We intend to prove that the administrator, Meredith Foster, orchestrated a fraudulent transfer of the decedent's real property, forged the signature of her dying father, and systematically destroyed estate assets to cover her tracks. Meredith didn't flinch. She just stared at a spot on the wall, her expression one of tragic endurance. We started with the paperwork. Maris called our first witness, or rather, submitted the sworn declaration of Paige Larkin. Since Paige was terrified of appearing, we had deposed her on video 2 weeks prior. Maris played the recording on the large monitors mounted on the walls. The room went silent as Paige's face appeared. She looked small in the chair, her eyes darting nervously. Question: Did you notarize the quitclaim deed dated October 15th? Answer: No. Question: Is that your stamp on the document? Answer: Yes. But I didn't put it there. My stamp was stolen from my car on October 7th. I reported it to the Secretary of State immediately. Question: Did you ever meet Robert or Ellen Foster? Answer: Never. The video ended. Meredith's lawyer, Silas Vance, stood up. Objection, he said smoothly. Ms. Larkin is a witness with a compromised history. She was suspended for negligence. Her claim that the stamp was stolen is a convenient excuse to avoid liability for an improper notarization she likely performed for cash. It goes to wait. Mr. Vance, the judge said, I will consider her statement. Move on. Maris called our next witness. Dr. Eris Thorne, a forensic document examiner. Dr. Thorne was a small, fastidious man who projected an image of enlarged signatures onto the screen. Exhibit A, he said, using a laser pointer to circle the signature on the deed. This purports to be the signature of Robert Foster. At first glance, it resembles his known standard. However, if you look at the microscopic pressure patterns, he zoomed in. The ink line looked jagged, hesitant. A natural signature has fluid movement. Doctor, Thorne explained, it has speed. This signature has what we call tremor of forgery. It stops and starts. The pen was lifted here and here. This indicates the signer was not writing their own name, but drawing a picture of the name. It is a tracing. He clicked to the next slide. Now, Exhibit B, the power of attorney document, allegedly signed by Ellen Foster on October 12th. He put up a comparison of Mom's signature from a birthday card and the signature on the POA. The slant is correct. Doctor, Thorne said, but notice the date. October 12th. Medical records indicate Ellen Foster was intubated and heavily sedated in the ICU on that date. She lacked the motor control to hold a pen, let alone sign a complex legal document with this degree of firmness. This signature was likely lifted from an older document and photocopied onto this form. It is a cut-and-paste forgery. I looked at Meredith. She was writing something on a notepad, her face blank. She wasn't looking at the screen. She wasn't looking at the evidence that proved she had stolen our parents' names. She was simply waiting for her turn to speak. And when her turn came, she weaponized the one thing I couldn't refute: my absence. Meredith took the stand after lunch. She walked with a slight limp that I had never seen before, a physical manifestation of her burden. Ms. Foster, Silas Vance asked gently, why did your parents sign the house over to you? Meredith took a deep breath, her voice trembling just enough to be audible. Because I was there, she said. She turned to look at the judge, her eyes wide and wet. My sister. Haley left 10 years ago. She moved to Illinois to build her career, and I am happy for her. I really am. But when Mom and Dad got sick, she wasn't here. I was the one driving them to appointments. I was the one managing their pills. I was the one mowing the lawn and fixing the roof. She paused to dab her eyes with a tissue. Dad was worried. She continued. He knew Haley was detached. He was afraid that if he died, she would just sell the house to the first bidder and liquidate everything. He wanted the house to stay in the family. He wanted me to have it because he knew I would protect it. He told me, Meredith, you are the caretaker. You earned this. Did you forge his signature? Vance asked. No, Meredith gasped, looking horrified. He signed it at the kitchen table. His hand was shaking because of the stroke. Yes, but he signed it, and Mom wanted me to have the authority. She trusted me. But what about Haley? Vance asked. gesturing to me. Why would she claim otherwise? Meredith looked at me then. Her eyes were cold, hard flint, but her mouth was shaped into a sad smile. Haley carries a lot of guilt, Meredith said softly. She wasn't there when they took their last breaths. She wasn't there for the hard years. I think attacking me is her way of trying to alleviate that guilt. If she can make me the villain, then she doesn't have to face the fact that she abandoned them. The word hung in the air. Abandoned. It hit me in the chest like a physical blow. It was the narrative I had feared for 5 years. The narrative that kept me awake at night. I wasn't there. I felt my composure slipping. I felt the heat rising in my cheeks. I wanted to stand up and scream that I had a job, that I called every day, that I came home every month. Maris kicked me under the table. Hard. I looked at her. She wrote one word on her legal pad. Receipts. I took a breath. I straightened my spine. When it was Maris's turn to cross-examine, she didn't ask Meredith about the forgery. She asked her about the narrative. Ms. Foster, Maris said, holding up a stack of paper. You claim my client abandoned her parents. I claim she wasn't physically present, Meredith corrected, her tone sharpening. Is it true that Haley Foster paid the property taxes on the home for the last 3 years of your parents' lives? Meredith blinked. I believe she helped out. Yes. Maris handed a document to the bailiff. Exhibit D. Bank records showing 3 payments of $4,000 each from Haley Foster to the GLEN tax collector. Is it true that Haley Foster paid for your mother's cardiac surgery copay? $5,000? Meredith shifted in her seat. She sent money. That is easy to do from 2 states away. It is not the same as changing diapers. Maris held up another stack. Exhibit E. Phone records. These show calls from Haley Foster to the family home every single evening at 7 o'clock for 5 years. Calls averaging 30 minutes. She flipped the page. And text messages. Hundreds of them. From your father to Haley. Maris projected a text onto the screen. It was dated 2 weeks before the stroke. Dad. Just got the package. Honey, the warm socks are perfect. Tell us about the new promotion. We are so proud of you. Love, Dad. Maris looked at Meredith. Does this sound like a father who felt abandoned? Does this sound like a man who was afraid his daughter would liquidate his legacy? Meredith's jaw tightened. He was being nice, she snapped. He didn't want to make her feel bad. Or, Maris said, stepping closer, he loved her, and he treated her as an equal, which is why he wrote a letter instructing that both daughters be protected. Meredith froze. There is no such letter, she said, her voice dropping to a hiss. We will get to that, Maris said. No further questions. I didn't testify to win the house. I testified to reclaim my name. When I took the stand, I didn't cry. I didn't plead. I just walked through the timeline. I explained the lockout. I explained the lack of inventory. I explained the silence. I didn't do this for the money. I told the judge, I have a career. I have savings. I did this because my sister decided that my grief was less valid than hers because I lived in a different zip code. She decided that because I wasn't in the room when they died, I didn't deserve to be in the room when they were remembered. The judge watched me, his face unreadable. Then came the turning point. Maris called Jonah Carden. The former estate attorney looked like he had aged 10 years since I last saw him. He sat in the witness box, wiping sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. He was appearing under subpoena. He clearly didn't want to be there. Mr. Carden, Maris asked, why did you withdraw from representing Meredith Foster? Jonah glanced at Meredith, then quickly looked away. I became aware of inconsistencies, he said. What kind of inconsistencies? Ms. Foster provided me with information regarding the asset transfer that contradicted facts I later learned, specifically regarding the timing of the deed recording. Did she push you to file the probate petition quickly? Jonah nodded. Extremely quickly. She called me the morning after her mother died. She wanted the letters of administration that day. She said it was an emergency. Did she tell you why? She said her sister was coming to town, and she needed to lock down the house before she arrived. She told me her sister was unstable and litigious. And did you ever attempt to contact Haley Foster? Ms. Foster instructed me not to. She said she would handle all communication. So she isolated the other heir? Jonah sighed. A long, deflating sound. Yes, she did. The courtroom was quiet. The picture was shifting. It wasn't just a forgery anymore. It was a conspiracy. But we still needed the smoking gun regarding the trust. We needed to prove the intent to hide the asset, not just the theft of it. Maris stood up. Your Honor? We called Dawn Pell. Dawn walked in, looking nervous but determined in her Sunday best. She clutched her purse like a shield. Dawn testified about the box of mail. She testified about Meredith's frantic cleaning spree. And then she produced the phone. It was an old flip phone, a burner she had used for work years ago. I saved this voicemail, Dawn said, her voice shaking, because it scared me. It was from the night before Robert had his stroke. He called me at 10 o'clock at night. Maris took the phone and plugged it into the courtroom audio system. She pressed play. Static filled the room. Then, Dad's voice. It was weak, breathless, but unmistakable. Dawn? It's Robert. Listen, I can't find the binder. I put it in the cedar chest, under the blankets. But I checked today and the blankets were moved. Meredith was in here cleaning. Dawn, if anything happens, tell Haley. Tell Haley the trust binder is in the cedar chest. Meredith must not get it. She is angry. Dawn, she is so angry about the money. Tell Haley. The recording clicked off. I put my hand over my mouth to stifle a sob. It was the first time I had heard his voice in 5 years, and it was a voice filled with fear. Fear of my sister. Meredith was staring at the table, her face pale as ash. She wasn't writing anymore. Silas Vance stood up, but he looked defeated. Objection, he said weakly. Hearsay, authentication issues, overruled. Judge Ambrose barked. The witness has authenticated the device. The voice is identified. The judge turned his gaze to Meredith. It was a look that could strip paint. Ms. Foster, the judge said, where is the cedar chest? Meredith stood up slowly. It was donated. Your Honor, years ago, to Goodwill. I don't believe you, the judge said. I beg your pardon? Meredith blinked. I don't believe you, the judge repeated. You have a pattern. Ms. Foster, you hide things. You destroy things, and based on the testimony I have heard, you have a distinct habit of keeping things that have value. An antique cedar chest is not something you drop at Goodwill. He leaned forward. I am issuing an order for an immediate search of the property at 412 Oak Street. The bailiff, the plaintiff, and counsel will proceed there immediately. You will accompany them. If that chest is found on the premises, I will hold you in contempt of court, and I will sanction you until you are bankrupt. Do you understand? Meredith swallowed. Yes, Your Honor. The drive to the house was a surreal procession. The bailiff's cruiser led the way, followed by Meredith's Mercedes, then my rental car with Maris, and finally Silas Vance. We pulled into the driveway. The house loomed, dark and modern with its new charcoal siding. It felt like walking into the belly of the beast. Meredith unlocked the door with a shaking hand. We searched the ground floor. Nothing. We searched the basement. Nothing. We searched the garage. Nothing. See? Meredith said, her voice shrill. It is gone. I told you. The bailiff looked at Maris. What about the attic? Maris asked. There is nothing in the attic, Meredith said quickly. Just insulation. Open it, the bailiff ordered. Meredith pulled down the hallway hatch. The ladder slid down with a screech of metal springs. I climbed up first. The attic was hot and smelled of fiberglass and dust. Sunlight streamed in through a single vent, illuminating floating moats. It was mostly empty, just piles of pink insulation. But in the far corner, tucked behind the chimney stack, covered with a heavy canvas drop cloth, was a rectangular shape. I walked over to it, my footsteps crunching on the plywood subfloor. I pulled back the canvas. It was the cedar chest. The wood was dark and rich, smelling of aromatic oil. It was the chest Mom's grandmother had brought from Virginia. "I found it!" I yelled down the hatch. I heard Meredith gasp below. The bailiff came up. We carried it down together, maneuvering it awkwardly through the opening. We set it on the hallway floor. "Open it," the bailiff told Meredith. She stared at the chest. "It is locked," she whispered. "I don't have the key." The bailiff pulled a multi-tool from his belt. "I can open it," he said. He popped the latch with a sharp crack. He lifted the heavy lid. It was empty, just the bare cedar bottom. Meredith let out a breath, a sound that was almost a laugh. "See?" she said, regaining her confidence. Empty. Just an old box I forgot about. No binder. No trust. I stared at the inside of the chest. I remembered playing with this chest when I was a kid. I remembered hiding inside it during hide and seek. The bottom looks too high. I said, "What?" Meredith snapped. "The depth." I said, "From the outside, it is deep. Inside, it is shallow." I reached in. I pressed my fingers against the cedar planks at the bottom. I felt around the edges. There was a tiny groove on the left side, a finger pull. I dug my nail into it and pulled up. The false bottom popped up with a quiet thwack. Underneath, nestled in the hidden compartment, was not a binder. It was a single sheet of paper, or rather, half a sheet. It had been ripped violently, right down the middle. The jagged edge was raw. I picked it up. The header was still intact on the top left. Side letter. Trust instructions, to be opened only in the event of my death. But the body of the text, the instructions, the distribution details, the beneficiaries, was gone, ripped away. I held the paper up. My hand wasn't shaking anymore. "Where's the other half?" "Meredith?" I asked. The hallway was silent. The bailiff was staring at the torn paper. Silas Vance closed his eyes and rubbed his temples, realizing his client was indefensible. Meredith looked at the paper, then at me. Her mask didn't just slip, it shattered. For the first time, I didn't see the composed matriarch or the grieving daughter. I saw the desperate, drowning woman who had borrowed money from sharks and stolen from her own parents to stay afloat. "I don't know what you are talking about," she whispered, but the lie was so thin it was transparent. "You tore it up," I said, my voice flat. "You found the binder. You read the letter. You realized it didn't give you the house. So you destroyed it. You destroyed the binder. And you tried to destroy this. But you couldn't bring yourself to burn the chest, could you? Because it was worth money." I handed the torn paper to the bailiff. "Bag it," the bailiff said, pulling out an evidence envelope. Maris looked at Meredith. "Destruction of evidence," she said calmly. "Spoliation. Fraud on the court. Silas, you might want to advise your client that this is no longer a civil matter. This is looking very criminal." Meredith backed up until she hit the wall. She looked small. She looked trapped. We went back to the courthouse. The judge looked at the torn paper. He looked at the photo of the false bottom. "This changes everything," Judge Ambrose said. "This isn't just a dispute over a deed. This is a deliberate, malicious cover-up." He turned to Meredith. "Ms. Foster, I am holding you in contempt. I am freezing all assets related to this property immediately. And I am referring this matter to the district attorney's office for investigation into forgery and theft." Meredith put her head in her hands and began to sob. But this time, nobody offered her a tissue. This time, the tears were real, because they were for herself. I sat back in my chair. I felt exhausted. I felt hollow. I had found the truth. I had the smoking gun. But looking at the torn edge of that paper, all I could think about was how much hatred it took to rip your father's final words in half. It wasn't just paper she had torn. It was us. And there was no tape in the world that could fix it. The final hearing in the matter of the estate of Robert and Ellen Foster was scheduled for 9 o'clock on a Tuesday morning. But by 8:30, the gallery of the BRIAR GLEN probate court was already standing room only. News travels fast in a small town, but scandal travels at the speed of light. The rumors of the hidden room, The torn document and the police raid on the house had turned a dry legal proceeding into a spectator sport. I walked down the center aisle, feeling the weight of 100 pairs of eyes on my back. I saw my Aunt Linda, who had ignored my Christmas cards for 5 years, whispering behind her hand to a neighbor. I saw the high school principal. I saw the barista from the coffee shop. For a moment, the old humiliation rose up in my throat like bile. I felt like the outcast again, the sister who didn't belong, the one who had been painted as unstable and greedy. My hands started to sweat. I wanted to turn around and run back to the safety of my rental car. Then I looked at the plaintiff's table. Maris Holt was there, arranging her binders with surgical precision, and next to her was the evidence box containing the torn half of the side letter. I wasn't here to be liked. I was here to be heard. I took my seat. Meredith was already at the defense table. She looked smaller today. The defiance that had armored her during the first days of the trial had cracked. Her new attorney, Silas Vance, looked like he was preparing for a funeral rather than a defense. He kept shuffling papers, avoiding eye contact with the bench. Judge Ambrose entered the courtroom, his black robe billowing. The bailiff called the room to order. The judge didn't waste time with pleasantries. "We are back on the record," Judge Ambrose said. "We have the final report from the forensic document examiner regarding the validity of the quitclaim deed and the power of attorney." He picked up a document from his bench. "The findings are conclusive. The signature on the deed dated October 15th is a tracing. The signature on the power of attorney is a transposition. Neither document was signed by the decedents, Robert and Ellen Foster." A murmur rippled through the gallery. The judge banged his gavel once, sharp and loud. Silence, given these findings, coupled with the sworn declaration of the notary, Paige Larkin stating her stamp was stolen. "The court is prepared to rule on the validity of the transfer. This deed is void ab initio. It never happened. The property at 412 Oak Street is, and has always been, an asset of the estate." Meredith flinched as if she had been slapped. The house, her fortress, her collateral, her identity, was gone. However, the judge continued, staring at Meredith, "We still have the matter of the destroyed trust instructions and the administration of the estate. We will take a 15-minute recess before hearing arguments on the removal of the administrator and potential sanctions." He stood up and swept out of the room. The moment the door closed behind the judge, Silas Vance leaned over to Meredith and whispered urgently in her ear. Meredith's face went white. She looked at me, then back at her lawyer. She nodded. Silas Vance stood up and walked over to our table. "Counsel," he said to Maris, "can we have a word in the hallway?" Maris looked at me. I nodded. We walked out into the corridor. The marble floors echoed with the sound of our heels. Meredith followed us, standing a few feet behind her lawyer, clutching her purse with white-knuckled desperation. "Haley," Silas said, his voice smooth and conciliatory, "we all know where this is going. The judge is going to remove Meredith as administrator. The deed is dead. We accept that." "And?" Maris asked, her arms crossed. "And," Silas continued, "we want to stop the bleeding. Meredith is willing to step down voluntarily. She will vacate the house within 30 days. She will agree to a judgment for the equity she stripped out, to be paid over time." He paused, glancing at the people walking by. "In exchange, we want a global settlement, a full release of all claims, and a confidentiality agreement." "A confidentiality agreement?" I asked. "Yes," Silas said, "a standard NDA. No discussing the details of the estate, the trust, or the specific documents found, with anyone. We seal the file. We keep this private, to protect the family name, to protect Meredith." I corrected. Meredith stepped forward. Her eyes were red-rimmed. "Haley, please," she whispered, "if this gets out, if the criminal investigation continues, I could lose my license. I could lose everything. I am offering you a judgment. I will pay you back. I just need you to sign the NDA, stop the investigation, tell the judge we settled." I looked at her. I saw the fear in her eyes. It was raw and terrifying. She wasn't just afraid of losing the house. She was afraid of the truth. She was afraid of the side letter. She knew what was on the missing half of that page, and she was terrified I would find out. If I signed, I would get the money. Eventually, I would get the house back. I would get my victory. All I had to do was help her bury the lie one last time. I thought about Dad's voice on the voicemail. Meredith must not get it. I thought about the 5 years I spent thinking I was crazy. I looked at Silas Vance. Then I looked at my sister. "No," I said. Meredith flinched. "What?" "I am not signing an NDA," I said quietly. "I am not trading silence for money." "Haley, be reasonable," Silas warned. "If we go back in there, the judge refers this to the district attorney. This becomes a felony case. Do you really want to send your sister to prison?" "I didn't send her anywhere." I said, "She bought the ticket when she stole that stamp." Meredith grabbed my arm. Her grip was tight, desperate. "You can't do this," she hissed, her mask slipping completely. "You don't know what will happen. You don't know who is involved." "Who is involved?" I asked, pulling my arm away. "Who are you protecting?" "Meredith?" She froze, realizing she had said too much. She stepped back, her breath coming in short gasps. "We are done here," Maris said. "We will see you inside." Back in the courtroom. The tension was thick enough to choke on. The gallery had quieted down. Sensing the shift in the atmosphere, Judge Ambrose took the bench. "Have the parties reached a resolution?" he asked. "No, Your Honor," Maris said. Standing up, "The plaintiff is ready to proceed. We ask the court to turn its attention to Plaintiff's Exhibit G." The torn document recovered from the hidden compartment of the cedar chest. The judge nodded. "Proceed. We have established that this document is a side letter of wishes accompanying the Foster Family Living Trust." Maris said, "We have established that the defendant, Meredith Foster, concealed it and then physically destroyed it by tearing it in half." Maris picked up a piece of paper. "However, Your Honor, destruction of a document does not always mean destruction of the information. Last week, we issued a subpoena to Ashford Trust and Ledger, the firm that drafted the original trust in 2008. We asked for any archived correspondence between the firm and Robert Foster." Meredith let out a small, involuntary sound, a whimper. Maris held up a certified document. Ashford Trust and Ledger responded yesterday afternoon. They produced a PDF of an email attachment sent to Robert Foster for his approval on August 10th, 5 years ago. It contains the full text of the side letter. The gallery gasped. I felt a chill run down my spine. The ghost in the machine, the digital footprint she couldn't erase. Maris walked to the projector. "Allow me to read the section that was torn away," she said. She placed the document on the glass. The text appeared on the wall, magnified for everyone to see. Clause 4. Disinheritance for bad acts. It is my express wish that my daughters share equally in my estate. However, should either beneficiary attempt to alter, forge, or conceal my estate documents, or attempt to disinherit the other through fraudulent means, that beneficiary's entire share shall be forfeited immediately. Maris paused, letting the words sink in. In the event of such forfeiture, the forfeited share shall be redirected to the GLEN Public Library Fund. Furthermore, the trustee is instructed to report any such fraud to the appropriate legal authorities. The room was deadly silent. The poison pill, Dad knew. He knew Meredith had a streak of control, of jealousy. He had put in a failsafe. If she played fair, she got half. If she tried to steal it all, she got nothing, by forging the deed. Meredith hadn't just stolen my half. She had triggered a clause that wiped out her own inheritance. Meredith stood up. She wasn't looking at the judge. She was looking at the screen, her mouth open in horror. "No," she whispered. "No, that's not. I didn't see that part. I tore it before I read the bottom." "Sit down." "Ms. Foster," the judge barked. But she didn't sit. She was unraveling. The reality was crashing down on her. She had lost the house. She had lost the money. And now, she had lost her safety net. "I couldn't help it," she screamed, turning to the gallery, looking for sympathy that wasn't there. I had to get the title. Grayson Pike was going to hurt me. The name rang out like a gunshot. Grayson Pike. The courtroom froze. Meredith stopped. She put her hands over her mouth, her eyes wide with terror. She realized what she had just done. She had admitted to the motive. She had admitted to the pressure. Judge Ambrose leaned forward, his face like thunder. What did you say? Ms. Foster? Silas Vance jumped up. Your Honor, I advise my client to invoke her Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination immediately. Meredith, sit down and be quiet. But Meredith was shaking her head, tears streaming down her face. They said they would take the house anyway. She sobbed, her voice cracking. I borrowed the money for the business, and it failed. They told me if I didn't pay them back in full, they would foreclose and expose me. They said they knew people. They gave me the name of the notary. They told me how to do it. She pointed a shaking finger at me. I did it to save the family name. Haley. If they had foreclosed, everyone would know I was a failure. I was trying to fix it. You didn't fix it, I said, my voice cutting through her hysteria. You broke it. You broke everything. Judge Ambrose slammed his gavel. Enough! The sound echoed off the wood paneling. Meredith collapsed into her chair, burying her face in her arms. The judge took a deep breath. He looked at the court reporter. I want a full transcript of this hearing sent to the district attorney's office by 5 o'clock today. He ordered. He turned to Meredith. Ms. Foster, your admission regarding Grayson Pike Capital suggests a conspiracy to commit mortgage fraud and forgery. This court is not equipped to handle criminal racketeering charges. But the Superior Court is... He turned to the clerk. I am issuing an order immediately voiding the deed transfer to Meredith Foster. The property reverts to the estate of Robert and Ellen Foster. I am removing Meredith Foster as administrator for cause. I am appointing a neutral professional fiduciary to take over the administration of the estate and to conduct a forensic accounting of all funds misappropriated by Ms. Foster, and pursuant to the terms of the trust instructions we have just authenticated, I am issuing a declaratory judgment that Meredith Foster has forfeited her beneficial interest in the trust. He looked at me. Haley Foster is recognized as the sole beneficiary of the remaining family assets, notwithstanding the charitable contribution clause which will be adjudicated by the new fiduciary. The judge paused. He looked at Meredith, who was weeping silently. You wanted to save the family name, Ms. Foster? You have done the exact opposite. You have turned a legacy of hard work into a cautionary tale of greed. Court is adjourned. The gavel banged. It was over. The gallery erupted into noise. Reporters, actual reporters from the county paper, were pushing toward the front. Silas Vance was packing his briefcase with frantic speed, trying to get away from his client. I sat there for a moment, unable to move. I had won. The deed was gone. The house was mine. The truth was public. But as I looked at Meredith, slumped over the table, alone, I didn't feel the rush of triumph I had expected. I felt a deep, exhausting sadness. Maris touched my arm. Haley, are you okay? I nodded slowly. I am okay. I stood up. I walked past the defense table. Meredith didn't look up. She was staring at her hands. Meredith, I said. She flinched, but she didn't turn. They are going to arrest you, I said softly. When the DA sees the transcript, I know, she whispered. I wanted to say something else. I wanted to say I told you so. I wanted to say, how could you? I wanted to scream at her for the 5 years she stole from me. But looking at her now, destroyed by her own lies, I realized she had already punished herself more than I ever could. She had lived in terror for 5 years. She had woken up every morning afraid of the mail, afraid of the phone, afraid of the doorbell. I pity you, I said, not because you lost, but because you never understood that I would have helped you. If you had just asked, if you had just told me you were in trouble, I would have helped you pay the debt. We could have saved the house together. Meredith looked up then. Her face was ravaged. I couldn't let you be the hero. Haley, she said, her voice raspy. I was supposed to be the strong one. That was your mistake. I said. "We weren't supposed to be heroes. We were supposed to be sisters." I turned and walked away. I walked down the center aisle. The townspeople parted for me, their faces a mixture of awe and shame. I saw Nolan in the back row. He gave me a small, solemn nod. I pushed open the heavy oak doors and stepped out into the bright Michigan sunlight. The air was cold and crisp. It smelled of snow and exhaust and freedom. I walked to my car. I had a lot to do. I had to meet with the new fiduciary. I had to inspect the house. I had to decide what to do with a property that held so many ghosts. I would probably sell it. I couldn't live there. Not after this. I would sell it and give the money to the library, just like Dad wanted. I would keep the photos, the letters, the memories that Meredith hadn't managed to destroy. I pulled my keys out of my pocket. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Maris. "It is done. The order is filed. You can go home now." I looked at the screen. Home. Eastbrook was my apartment. BRIAR GLEN was my history. But standing there in the parking lot, I realized that home wasn't a place. It was the feeling of knowing who you were. Meredith had tried to take that from me. She had tried to rewrite my identity, but the ink hadn't held. I got into the car and started the engine. I wasn't the victim anymore. I wasn't the ghost. I was Haley Foster. And for the first time in 5 years, the road ahead was completely clear. Thank you for listening to this story. It has been a journey walking in Haley's shoes, navigating the treacherous waters of family betrayal and the slow, steady burn of justice. We often think of revenge as a loud, explosive act, but sometimes, as Haley showed us, the most powerful revenge is simply refusing to be erased. I would love to hear your thoughts on the ending. Did Meredith deserve to lose everything, or was the tragedy of her debt enough punishment? And what would you have done if you were in Haley's position? Would you have signed the NDA to save your family's reputation? Or would you have burned it all down for the truth? Please leave a comment below and let me know where you are listening from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you enjoyed this realistic take on family drama, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories for more tales of justice, secrets, and the long road to redemption. Until next time, keep your ledgers balanced and your truth close. Goodbye.